in advance of the start of fall camp 2019 at UA with 6 areas of emphasis. I'm going to start on the offensive side of the football. When we go out there tomorrow for the media viewing periods, some areas where the eyeballs will be attracted to when we go out there. I'll start with the offensive line. Look, I'm a line of scrimmage guy, from the giddy up. So I'm always interested in the offensive and defensive lines. This won't be any different. The biggest difference this year is that it won't be as much really about the tackle positions, because you're going to go out there expecting to see Alex Leatherwood at left tackle, Jedrick Wills at right tackle. Where the intrigue will come in is at those interior spots, especially the guard position. Is Matt Womack, the veteran, going to be the guy at right guard? Certainly has experience in his corner. Started 14 games at right tackle 2 seasons ago. Is Emil Ekiyor, the redshirt freshman, ready to step in and be a starter at either of those guard spots? We saw him at left guard predominantly back in the spring. And a lot of this has to do with the status of Deonte Brown. Brown, of course, suspended for the college football playoff, along with the departed Kidrick James, now of SMU. So that opens things up at both guard spots and the center position, where you're trying to replace Ross Pierce-Baker. So my expectation for tomorrow is that interior trio will look a lot like we saw at the end of spring practice with Ekiyor and Chris Owens and Matt Womack. But as camp rolls along, what might we see in terms of combinations? Because in the past, spring practice hasn't signaled the end of combinations or tinkering with that offensive line at Alabama. We've seen it. Go a scrimmage, go 2 scrimmages in. Even with Ross Pierce-Baker, a couple of years ago, looked like Ross Pierce-Baker was going to be the starting center all the way through fall camp. And then right before the start of the regular season, it's Bradley Bozeman, and Pierce-Baker goes back to guard. So, these competitions at the interior spots could go well into fall camp and even perhaps as late as bordering on game week for Duke. Elsewhere on the offensive side of the ball, I'm not so much wondering about the running backs and sort of the pecking order that we'll probably see when the season gets underway, when you come out of fall camp and you've got your top 3 guys. And that's really what it's going to probably play out more like this year. Last year and even the year before was sort of an embarrassment of riches when you've got Damian Harris and you got Josh Jacobs and you got Najee Harris, and Brian Robinson can't hardly get on the field as sort of the 4th guy. Well, this year I could see it being more of what we've seen in most years under Nick Saban, and that's 3 backs, really. 3 backs with legitimate opportunities in the rotation. Is Najee Harris going to be the feature, semi-featured? Because at Alabama, other than Derrick Henry in 2015, been a lot of years where it's sort of been a co-deal. Look at 2012, right? You had Eddie Lacy and a true freshman in TJ Yeldon. Both those guys went over 1,000 yards in 2012. So I could envision more of that type of scenario. But the 3rd back, is it in fact Trey Sanders, the 5-star freshman? And I think there's a good chance that it will be, because he brings a little bit of a different dynamic than the 225-pounders do in Najee Harris and Brian Robinson. More so, again, interested to see workload and how these guys are used, because the last year you would see 3 backs for Alabama in the first 3 series, at least 3, but you pretty much would see Josh Jacobs and or Damian Harris early, and then you would see that 2-back set with Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris a couple of 3 series into football games. So how Steve Sarkisian goes about using this group of backs compared to, say, Mike Loxley in 2018, Brian Dable in 2017, that'll be something I'm keeping an eye on as we move throughout fall camp. Quarterback depth. We talked about this with Cecil Hurd of the Tuscaloosa News and Tidesports.com yesterday. Been a lot of positive buzz about Mac Jones. And can he sort of build on that and separate himself further from the youngsters in Talia Tagovailoa and Paul Tyson? How many quarterbacks might we see early in the regular season? I would think 3, maybe 4, because you had the 4-game redshirt rule. But Mac Jones, not just trying to establish himself as the clear-cut number 2 guy to Tua Tagovailoa, but also make a bit of a statement in terms of next spring, if it comes down to that, and Tua moves on, that race, when it gets underway next March, is Mac Jones going into spring football the clear-cut leader to succeed Tua Tagovailoa? The competition will play out throughout the regular season. A lot of stuff we won't see, we won't know about. But Mac Jones is going to have that opportunity, it looks like, initially to really sort of assert himself as the guy behind Tua. Now, moving over to the defensive side of the ball, I think you got to start at inside linebacker. And yes, we will talk about outside linebacker in just a minute in association with the pass rush. But you got to start at weak side linebacker, that guy who's going to line up next to Dylan Moses. And God forbid something happens to Dylan Moses, right? All bets are off at inside linebacker if Dylan Moses is lost for an extended stretch. But is it Josh McMillan, the 5th-year senior? It's kind of an oddity, isn't it, for this Alabama program? For a 5th-year guy to, first of all, hang around long enough, to remain patient enough, steadfast enough, and his turn actually come around 5 years into his time in the program. That's where Josh McMillan is right now. He's got that kind of opportunity. Now, he's going to have to fend off some promising young players, most notably Shane Lee, who we saw in spring practice. I think Lee's going to make a push there. And then you got a couple of other second-year guys, Cahoe, Moody, a 3rd-year guy, Markel Benton, that are going to be in that mix as well. We've heard Nick Saban say it could be a by-committee approach. You know, you could have a base option to go with Dylan Moses. Then in nickel, you know, you could have another guy that plays that weak side linebacker position. Dime, it won't matter, because if Dylan Moses is healthy and upright, he's going to be the every down inside linebacker. So weak side linebacker, I think you got to start there on defense. Safety in the secondary, I think at corner, you feel really good, obviously, about Trayvon Diggs, Patrick Surtain II, Josh Jobe coming on to be one of those sort of co-starters, a guy that in the nickel, which Alabama is in, seems like 80% of the time now. Josh Jobe will be on the field at corner. Interesting to see whether or not is Trayvon Diggs at star in the nickel, or is it Patrick Surtain, or is it a wild card in some situations. With Shaheem Carter, he can certainly do that as well. But right now, your top 3 corners, you look set between corner and star. So that leaves you with safety, and Xavier McKinney is a slam dunk. You know that already. The other guy, it comes from Shaheem Carter, comes from Jared Maiden. You've got a vet now and Daniel Wright that's been around a little while that's in that competition as well. Eddie Smith, the 2nd-year player, is in that mix. It was Jared Maiden we saw wire to wire back in the spring. But as we've talked about many times here on the program, difficult for me to imagine a guy with as many important snaps under his belt and who has played extremely well on some of those big stages, like the Georgia game in the SEC championship matchup last December. 3 pass breakups for Shaheem Carter from the star position, but he can play safety. So how does Carter sort of fit into all this? Because it's hard for me to imagine Shaheem Carter not being a top 5, even top 4 option in that defensive secondary. Although, again, we saw Maiden a ton there in the spring. What else do we have? Finally, on the defensive side of the ball, pass rush depth. And this is, again, in connection with the recent departure of Ayabi Anoma. And by the way, if you haven't heard or seen already today, Ayabi Anoma removed from the official roster there on RollTide.com. So that should answer any questions you may have still had. You shouldn't have had any, but that should do it when Anoma is totally removed from the official roster at RollTide.com. But pass rush depth, because what did we see in the last game that Alabama played? Pass rush depth took an absolute hit with Christian Miller going out against Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl. And then you're pretty much down to, in that situation, Anthony Jennings, who has played lights out against Clemson each of the last 2 years, but you didn't have enough to go with him. So, okay, you got Jennings back for his senior year. You're hoping that Terrell Lewis, for the first time in 3 years, can go through an extended stretch of good health. If he and Anthony Jennings you can get a healthy regular season, a healthy season out of those guys, you're going to be fine in the pass rush. You're going to be fine. But you're going to need Christopher Allen to step it up, And watching Allen in the spring, he was making progress. Christopher Allen, a year ago, it was mid-August that he did his ACL. So he's not even quite to his 1 year anniversary. Terrell Lewis has already passed his from last July. But Christopher Allen definitely becomes bigger in the mix of things. And, trying to figure out another guy or two to go with those three in the pass rush. Kevin Harris going to be ready? It was obvious that Sal Sunseri really liked the newcomer in the spring, worked with the second-team defense. But I'll be interested to see how much bulk and muscle Harris has been able to put on in the last 3 or 4 months since we last saw the early enrollee in the A-Day game. Jerez Parks, another guy with an opportunity now in front of him. But pass rush depth, and not just at outside linebacker, but up front. Okay, Raekwon Davis is going to give you a pass rush. But you know what else Raekwon Davis is going to get early in the season? Raekwon Davis is going to get doubles. I mean, look at this defensive line right now. You've got LaBryan Ray expected, although I didn't like Nick Saban's update on LaBryan Ray in Hoover. It may not be anything, but hearing Saban talk about Ray dealing with some foot injury, ankle stuff, you didn't like the sound of that. It only pointed to the need for another end or two to really step forward during this upcoming fall camp. But you got Raekwon Davis, okay. But when he's getting doubled, which he will from the opening snap of the Duke game, I got to think, is DJ Dale ready as a true freshman to be a disruptive force there, give you that interior pass rush? Is LaBryan Ray going to be able to give you that interior pass rush? Hadn't had to do that really yet. LaBryan Ray has been pretty much an end and a guy that you would see in base and nickel looks. Well, he's trying to make that transition similar to what we saw with Jonathan Allen in 2015, I believe it was. Jonathan Allen you saw go inside more because he needed time to get to the point physically where he could be inside. And Jonathan Allen did that. We know he did it quite successfully. Is LaBryan Ray ready to make that sort of transition and be an every down guy? Base, nickel it in, dime, rabbits, go inside, help out on the pass rush with Raekwon Davis. That's a question we're going to have answered for us in the next couple of weeks. And then beyond those guys, Fedarian Mathis going to be able to give you something outside of just rundowns? Is he going to be able to give you some pass rush? What about these 6 newcomers? Justin Aboigbe, Antonio Alfano, Dale. We saw all those guys in spring practice, but there's 3 more now on campus. A couple of guys and Stephon Wynn, with still an opportunity to provide something there. Christian Barmore, one of those guys. So you like the numbers up front, but you're kind of still waiting to see who's going to emerge and give you, as much as anything, some legitimate pass rush depth. So there you go. 6 areas of emphasis for the Alabama Crimson Tide in advance of tomorrow's start of Fall Camp 2019.